Jerome Lawrence and the 1999 slaying of Marjorie Collette. It took a total of 16 years for the Chicago police to apprehend their suspect in a 1999 homicide case, and an additional decade for him to finally receive his sentence. On May 21, 1999, 65-year-old Marjorie Collette was discovered deceased in her bed by her niece in the Edison Park neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. Jerome Lawrence and another individual had been performing remodeling work on Marjorie's house in the days leading up to her death, which led to them becoming suspects. After Lawrence stole his wife's car and contacted her from Arkansas and Georgia seeking assistance, she reported him to the Chicago police. Just 4 days after the crime occurred, a detective and an assistant state's attorney traveled to the Marion jail in Arkansas, where Lawrence had been detained on charges of theft by receiving and an Illinois parole violation. During questioning, authorities discovered that Lawrence was in possession of Marjorie's belongings and subsequently placed him in an interview room. However, when they returned that evening, the room was empty. Lawrence had managed to crawl through the ceiling and escape from the jail, marking him as the 5th person to flee the then-new facility. The last time Willie Britton saw his stepfather was earlier that same year, when Lawrence was arrested on a domestic battery charge for assaulting Willie's mother. Within a month of that arrest, the police were interviewing Willie and his mother about Lawrence in connection with a much more horrifying crime: the murder and home invasion of Marjorie Collette, a resident of the far northwest side of Chicago. Willie revealed that Lawrence had devised the plan for the home invasion, which he discussed with his relatives. Willie recounted, "He saw this as a way to support us, a second chance. He figured he had this lady, and she would be his easy come-up." Lawrence believed that Marjorie, who had worked at Walgreens for 35 years and had retired just months earlier, was wealthy. He suffocated Marjorie with her pillow, slit her dog's throat to silence its barking, and fled with a bag full of her electronics and a safe. Despite being arrested multiple times in Florida and using an alias there, Lawrence was never linked by Florida authorities to the Chicago case. On February 11, 2015, 16 years after the crime, 32-year-old Willie, who had been haunted by nightmares of encountering his stepfather again, faced one of his worst fears when he unexpectedly walked past Lawrence. The encounter took place in the 5300 block of North Lincoln Avenue in Chicago's Budlong Woods neighborhood. Willie recalled, "I could not believe it. My jaw almost dropped. I pulled out my phone and called the police. I told them his name and that he is wanted for first-degree murder and has been wanted for 16 years. Willie entered a nearby Chase Bank while waiting for the police to arrive. When officers responded minutes later, he ran outside, shouting to point out Lawrence. However, Willie stated that the police were hesitant to arrest Lawrence, who presented them with a Florida Department of Corrections ID under the name Joseph Mahar. Willie insisted, "They almost let this man get away again." He presented the bogus ID. "I am like, look, I know 100% fact this man is my stepfather." After verifying Lawrence's identity through his Illinois Department of Corrections photo and confirming it with fingerprints, the police arrested him and charged him with first-degree murder. On September 14th, Lawrence appeared in court. Having exchanged the jeans and gray hoodie he was arrested in for a brown Department of Corrections jumpsuit. As he entered the Cook County Circuit Court courtroom, he stared into the sparsely occupied gallery where Marjorie's niece, Judy Beavis, was seated. Judy, who anxiously leaned over the courtroom benches with her hands clasped during the hearing, expressed, "I am just glad they got him because he threatened our family. When he escaped, the police were watching the house. Through the investigators," he said, "once he got out, he would get us. It is kind of scary seeing him back in Illinois." Officials from the Florida Department of Corrections explained that once an inmate is in custody, their identifying information, including their name and fingerprints, is sent to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which then relays it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. The FBI assigns the inmate a number. In Lawrence's case, the FBI assigned him a second number before making the connection between his warrants in Illinois and his new arrests in Florida. Prosecutors depicted Lawrence as a career criminal, highlighting 6 felony charges in Cook County, including burglary and robbery, as well as 4 additional felony charges in Florida, such as fleeing and eluding in 1999, robbery in 2000, and arson in 2005. Nearly a decade after his arrest, on February 4, 2025, 55-year-old Jerome Lawrence was sentenced to 17 years in prison, with the requirement to serve 85% of his sentence. He was given credit for the 3,434 days he had already served. In 2022, a man named Ryan David Staggs, a car dealership owner, went missing in Newport, Oregon. His disappearance sparked an investigation that would remain unresolved for nearly 3 years before a breakthrough led to the arrest of 2 men. Ryan was last seen on January 29, 2022, at his home located at 175 Northwest 55th Street in Newport. Despite numerous tips and pieces of information provided to investigators, no significant leads emerged, and the case eventually went cold. However, almost 3 years later, on December 27, 2024, a search warrant was executed at the home of 60-year-old Jack David Baird in the 200 block of Northwest 7th Street in Newport. This development came after witnesses came forward 3 days earlier, claiming that Baird had been seen at Ryan's home the day after his disappearance. Additionally, witnesses reported that Baird had been seen digging in his own backyard with a backhoe. Police confirmed that Baird had rented a backhoe 2 days after Ryan went missing. During the search of Baird's property, cadaver dogs alerted to the scent of human remains in the soil removed from the backyard. Despite an extensive search, no human remains were found. However, the investigation uncovered additional information and identified more witnesses, leading to Baird's arrest. He was charged with abuse of a corpse, and a probable cause affidavit linked his arrest to Ryan's disappearance. The affidavit also noted that neighbors had reported hearing Ryan screaming at his home on the day he disappeared. 2 weeks later, on January 9, 2025, 54-year-old Murphy Henry was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse, second-degree slaying, and tampering with evidence. This arrest followed the discovery of remains at a shallow gravesite in a remote area of Lincoln County. The remains are believed to be Ryan's, though the Oregon State Medical Examiner's Office is still conducting examinations to confirm their identity. In a significant breakthrough, the police have arrested a suspect in the long unsolved case of Dawn Momohara, a Honolulu, Hawaii teenager whose tragic demise nearly 5 decades ago shocked the community and the high school where her body was discovered. Advances in DNA testing ultimately led investigators to potential suspects in the case. On March 20, 1977, 16-year-old Dawn Momohara left her home, informing her mother that she was going to meet friends at a shopping center in Honolulu. When she failed to return home that afternoon, she was reported missing. The following morning, just before students began their Monday classes, Dawn's body was discovered on the second floor of the English building at McKinley High School, where she was a sophomore. The scene was horrifying. Dawn was found partially clothed, lying on her back with an orange cloth tied around her neck. An autopsy later confirmed that she had been strangled, and the medical examiner noted signs of assault. At the time, the only lead investigators had was a witness's description of a man and a car seen in the high school parking lot on the night Dawn disappeared. The witness described the vehicle as a maroon and white Pontiac sedan. In the weeks following her death, the Honolulu police stopped and checked all vehicles matching this description and canvassed the neighborhood, showing residents photographs of Dawn to determine if anyone had seen her on the day she went missing. It remains unclear whether Dawn ever made it to the Ala Moana Center, where she had told her mother she was meeting friends. Despite these efforts, no leads emerged. Although police retrieved an unknown man's DNA sample from Dawn's shorts, they were unable to identify a suspect, and the case eventually went cold. For over 4 decades, the case remained unsolved until 2020, when a cold case detective resubmitted evidence for forensic examination using updated technology. By September 2023, DNA tests led investigators to 2 potential suspects, brothers Gideon Castro and William Castro, both of whom had been interviewed in the immediate aftermath of Dawn's slaying. During the initial investigation, Gideon Castro had told police that he met Dawn at a school dance in 1976, shortly before he graduated. William Castro, in his interviews, admitted to periodically talking to Dawn on the phone, but denied having any kind of relationship with her. Once forensic tests narrowed the pool of suspects to the Castro brothers, investigators took further steps to confirm their involvement. Lieutenant Dina Thames explained that police traveled to Chicago, where William Castro lived, to secretly obtain a DNA sample from one of his adult children for comparison. This comparison ultimately excluded William as a suspect. Investigators then turned their attention to Gideon Castro, traveling to Utah to obtain a DNA sample from his adult children. This time, they found a match. On January 21, 2025, nearly 5 decades after the crime, 66-year-old Gideon Castro was arrested at his nursing home in Utah on a charge of second-degree slaying. Castro, one of Dawn's former schoolmates, had joined the U.S. Army Reserve after graduating from high school. He is set to be extradited back to Honolulu to face charges. Lieutenant Thames expressed gratitude to all the individuals and agencies involved in the case, stating, "On behalf of the Honolulu Police Department, I want to thank all the individuals and agencies that made today's arrest possible. Thank you for all your dedication and commitment to the tireless pursuit of justice for Dawn and the Momohara family." Kara Porter, co-founder of the Utah Cold Case Coalition, highlighted the importance of DNA testing in solving cold cases, noting that while funding for such tests is limited, the results are highly reliable. Porter, who has studied the psychological impact on individuals carrying the secret of an unconfessed crime, explained that such secrets can weigh heavily on some people, causing physical and emotional deterioration over time. However, she also noted that others may live as if nothing happened, excusing their actions with justifications like youth, mistakes, or intoxication. Porter's insights underscore the complex psychological dynamics that can accompany unresolved crimes and the long-lasting impact they have on both victims' families and perpetrators. On November 21, 1985, 51-year-old Roger Dean became the victim of a horrifying slaying that unfolded like a scene from a movie. A man wearing a ski mask broke into Roger's home in Lone Tree, Littleton, Colorado, and forced him to tie up his wife, Doris Jean DJ Dean, and tape her mouth shut. The intruder then demanded $30,000 from the couple's savings account. When Roger attempted to flee, the intruder shot and killed him. The perpetrator fled the scene, leaving behind a backpack and an orange ski mask that Roger had torn off during the struggle. Witnesses reported seeing the suspect run down the street and escape in a car. From the outset, several aspects of the case puzzled investigators. Roger had twine marks on only one wrist, suggesting he had never actually been tied up by the gunman. Additionally, Roger was wearing contact lenses when he was shot, yet his glasses were found in an upstairs bedroom covered with duct tape. Sergeant Anthony Spurlock of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department believed these items were red herrings, planted to create the illusion that Roger had been blindfolded and bound. Spurlock theorized that Roger had orchestrated the incident, hiring someone to stage a kidnapping so he could withdraw $30,000 from his bank account and keep the money for himself. During the investigation, police discovered that Roger had secretly transferred nearly $30,000 from his business into a private account. However, DJ vehemently denied that her husband was capable of such a scheme, stating, "In my heart, I cannot believe that Roger had anything to do with this. This is the man I was married to for 26 years. And yes, there had been personal problems in the last years, especially since the demise of our son. But I knew the man too well. DNA samples were taken from hairs found on the ski mask, but due to the limitations of DNA technology at the time, the case went cold." 5 years later, on July 21, 1990, DJ and her daughter Tamara received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to be Roger's killer. The letter demanded $150,000, which the author claimed Roger owed him, and threatened further violence if the money was not paid. The letter read, in part, "Do you know that I have met your daughter Tammy on a few occasions? Do not make me end her. Your son is deceased. Your husband is deceased. Do not risk your daughter. She is the last one left." Authorities believed the letter was genuine and that its author was Roger's killer. The writer promised to call DJ 6 days later, on July 27th. In response, DJ and Tamara were placed under round-the-clock protection, and FBI agents moved into their home, setting up a wiretap. When the caller contacted DJ as promised, he claimed Roger owed him money and demanded repayment. DJ agreed to pay the $150,000. The FBI traced the call to a phone booth in Denver, but by the time agents arrived, the caller had vanished. Over the next several weeks, the perpetrator called 12 more times, eventually instructing DJ to drive to a supermarket 20 miles north of her home and await further instructions. With the help of an FBI agent hidden in her car and a SWAT team nearby, DJ attempted to trap the caller. However, after she left the money in an alley behind an apartment complex in downtown Denver on August 19, 1990, no one showed up to collect it. Special Agent Bob Pence speculated that the perpetrator may have suspected law enforcement involvement or simply got cold feet. The extortionist's final call to Tamara included a chilling threat to end her life, vowing to strike when she least expected it. Despite extensive efforts, investigators were unable to identify the caller, who was described as a white man, approximately 6 feet tall, with an extensive vocabulary. However, a conflicting account from a 9-year-old girl, Carly Gibson, described the suspect as a black man. The statute of limitations for the extortion case eventually expired, and the investigation went cold. 13 years later, in 2003, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation developed a DNA profile from the evidence and entered it into a national database, but no matches were found. Another 15 years passed before advancements in DNA technology allowed investigators to identify the suspect's likely parents in 2020. The family had 2 sons, one of whom, Michael Chanel Jefferson, became the primary suspect. Law enforcement began monitoring Jefferson, and during a Spirit Airlines flight between Los Angeles and New Orleans, detectives observed him drinking from a plastic water bottle. When Jefferson discarded the bottle, detectives intercepted it and collected it for testing. The DNA on the bottle matched the profile from the ski mask left at the crime scene in 1985. Additionally, an investigator who listened to recordings of the 1990 extortion calls believed Jefferson's voice matched that of the caller. On March 23, 2021, Michael Jefferson was arrested and extradited to Colorado. On August 6, 2024, the 67-year-old pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit slaying as part of a plea bargain. On January 16, 2025, he was sentenced to 32 years in prison, with credit for more than 3 years already served. While this was the maximum sentence, Douglas County's district attorney noted that Jefferson could be paroled in as little as 8 years. Roger's daughter, Tamara Dean Harney, expressed frustration that Jefferson never took accountability for his actions. She stated, "I have been sitting behind him for 4 years. His expression is exactly what it was the entire time. He seems emotionless. He does not take any accountability. He does not seem like he cares." Tamara also lamented the lack of closure, saying, "He could have done a lot for me and a lot for himself if he would have just talked about why he did what he did and offered an apology at least, or a recognition at all would be helpful." She added that the lengthy legal process and delays, compounded by a DNA scandal involving former forensic scientist Yvonne "Missy" Woods, made her grateful her mother was not alive to witness the ordeal. The motive for the crime remains unclear, though investigators speculated that Jefferson, who was in a relationship with one of Roger's employees, may have believed Roger was wealthy and targeted him for financial gain. In court, Tamara reflected on the impact of Jefferson's actions, stating, "I never gave up hope that today would eventually come. Trying to put into words the impact that Michael Jefferson has had on me is challenging at best. He not only ended my dad's existence, but over the years, he purposefully attempted to make me question my safety and security, as well as the inherent goodness of people."